the end of March, which will reduce the ongoing risk. It's also worth noting that prior to the report going final, one of the 3 priority 1 actions had been completed, which was in relation to ensuring a contract register was in place, which confirms responsibility for contracts within this service area. We have previously raised to this committee in January a limited assurance audit on contract management, and this contributes to a themed weakness area for improvement across the new authority. Given the size of the authority and number of contracts, this is an area to keep under review to ensure risks are being managed. Turning to agenda page 34 is a good news story which shows that the vendor management follow-up and most of the actions being completed. Although there is a new move to a new financial management system, this review was still included in the plan due to the potential for fraud risk. Turning to agenda page 35, this highlights the progress made on the baseline assessment for fraud. Whilst there has been no overall change from the previous review, it is an area of focus for us in next year's plan as well. The SCC lead in this area was seconded to a key project that meant further progress in the area has been limited during the last year. We'll be completing a further baseline towards the end of 23-24 to enable the authority time to take action on the previously reported weaknesses. And finally, just turning through pages 36 through to 45, it shows a summary of our work completed to date, providing members with information on type of work, the assurance and number of recommendations made within the 22-23 audit plan. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions for Adam, please? Andy, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for the introduction. Really it is around that limited opinion, and I know, like you said, we haven't got that contract anymore, but my concern is around this contract management, and we've again seen a risk in that area. Just to ask the 151 really, what action are we taking on that, and will we have a fuller report back about it at any point? Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of contract management, one of the key controls in the new finance system, and one of the areas we've been within the county council trying to push on, is a program called No PO, No Pay. So making sure orders are paced and commitments enter into the system in the first place. That's obviously a key starting point of the whole thing. We have done quite a bit of training with managers around procurement training as well. And recently we've been part of a national pilot of 4 councils looking at procurement processes across the council, and have had an external assessment on that. We've actually come out as good. And as a result of that, there is also an action plan to take us to even better than good, as it were. So there's a number of actions in place across the new authority, partly bringing everybody up to speed with the new procurement processes and training them, but also actually raising the standard across the place. Very happy to bring a report back to members at the appropriate time. We'll provide an update on the procurement side of things.
Thank you, and I presume that is in your programme of pieces of work being done for the coming year.
Yes.
Are there any other questions for Adam? Yes, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Page 35 says about, says about there's been no recent training for members, although Somerset Audit Partnership is planning to deliver this in March 23. So hopefully, I know that hasn't happened yet, but hopefully we'll be doing training soon. But my question is, there's also no current portfolio audit lead for fraud. Now, I would assume that the fraud comes under the corporate resources portfolio holder. You wouldn't actually have a lead member just for fraud, as what they've said in the report. So can I assume that that does encompass under Liz's portfolio, anything to do with fraud within the organisation? Thank you.
Liz, please.
Liz on the spot, sorry.
I'd just like to make 2 points. One is that, and I've just been to the dentist, so apologies. One is that we now have an associate lead member leading on risk. So that's new. That's extant. And the other point I'd like to make is actually there may be a lead member, but it's the responsibility of every member and every officer. So I don't know how it gets named particularly, but I think it's much wider than something being the remit of one member or officer. It's a mindset for everyone.
I totally agree with what you say. It was just that they put it in there as like a recommendation. Just wanted to, but it is everyone's responsibility. Thank you.
Mike, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 points, page 40, really. There's the follow-up on adults quality assurance framework, and it's been deferred, because the actions need to be completed by July 2023. And with the comments from Athena, can we have an assurance that that will take place and that the committee will be informed, because we certainly don't want an issue over adults coming forward again on this contract. I've got another question after that, but on something different.
Yes, I do believe the quality assurance framework is in the plan, which is in the next report for quarters 1 and 2 and will be delivered. We've also got the action tracking dashboard as well, which will monitor those actions across all audits within Somerset Council.
Thank you. The second point, Mr. Chairman, is on the same page 40, is the grant certification, the test and trace support grant, and that has been removed because it's administered by the district councils. But how are we ensuring that those have been carried out? We're saying it's not our problem because it was a district council's, but surely we have a responsibility to ensure that those test and trace were carried out at some stage.
We have been carrying out the test and trace sign-offs across the Somerset districts as part of their plans in the last year. I don't have them all to hand, but I believe they've all been signed off. But I will check that and just get back to you if there are any outstanding.
Yeah, thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quickie on the staff turnover. How is it currently impacting on our service delivery?
Who wants to answer that? Adam.
Is that staff turnover within internal audit or within the wider Somerset Council? Wider council. That's probably might be you, Jason.
Clearly, that in terms of risk, it's a key issue for us, staff turnover at this current time. And I guess I'll wear two slightly different hats on this. One is I want a bit of staff turnover because actually the business case for LGR was based on removal of a number of posts. However, the staff turnover never quite happens in the right areas. Quite often you find, and if staff turnover is too high, that's a problem. It's a particular problem across local government at the moment and in some of our key services because of the recruitment difficulties. That if staff leave, being able to attract new staff in, particularly in social work or some of the professions, we're seeing that in planning, for instance. It's very hard to bring in those sort of staff. So it is a risk to service delivery.
Okay, so any more questions? Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. Is Adam again?
Thank you. The next report is our audit plan and charter. This report is for members to approve the audit plan and the charter for 23-24. The plan sets out the individual work assignments we plan to undertake during the first half of 23-24 up to the end of September 2023. The requirement for the audit plan is to be aligned to corporate and service priorities and corporate and service risks. When pulling the plan together, a number of factors have been considered, and these are highlighted on agenda page 49. As stated on that page, we intend for the plan to remain flexible throughout the year, as risks and priorities naturally will change, especially as the new council gets up and running, and any changes will be highlighted to the committee. We always welcome the input of audit committee members on matters of assurance, and especially any areas that you require around governance, risk and internal control. As highlighted on agenda page 51, Alistair has provided a separate document that gives an overview of potential audit work and where it links back to corporate priorities and corporate and operational risks. I believe he did send that last night, so I do apologise if it was a little bit late, but the aim of that document is to sort of help looking forward on sort of identifying potential assurance work for members. The aim is to use this document to assess ongoing further areas and to ensure that we have even coverage across various risk areas. Do please look through that document, and if you have any thoughts on areas that you feel should be included for the second half of the year, please let us know. Okay, turning to agenda pages 54 and 5 on Appendix A, this provides an overview of the audits that we've identified for quarters 1 and quarter 2. This is what I'm asking you to approve in terms of our coverage of work for the first half of the year. As part of identifying potential audits for inclusion in the plan, we have aligned audits to strategic and operational risks, and the document Alistair sent out last night also shows where that alignment is. This plan has been developed in consultation with the newly appointed directors at Somerset Council, and we have just started engagement with the Tier 3 managers to assess priorities in more detail. Appendix B on page 56 shows other audits that we have already identified that could be included in the plan from October 23. As a new organisation, strong governance and financial management are key, as these are the foundations for the whole organisation. If these are weak, the organisation will fail. A number of key areas are currently marked for inclusion, as shown in the table. However, I do expect more may come in throughout the year due to the level of ongoing change. Timings will be key and could change throughout the year. And finally, turning to Appendix C on agenda page 58. This is the internal audit charter for 23-24. We are required under the public sector internal audit standards to have a charter in place that is reviewed and approved by the audit committee regularly. At this time, there are no changes to the charter that was presented to the Somerset County Council Audit Committee last year. The charter outlines the purpose and the authority of internal audit and the way we engage with management and the audit committee. This document is aligned to current best practice. Does anyone have any questions?
Mandy, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the report. Just wanted to have a quick look at Appendix A, which is sort of what you're asking to look at today. I'm struggling with that because whilst we don't know the full detail, a lot of these are so high level and vague, it doesn't give an idea. My other concern was that you've put it all into service by service, but we've just talked about contract management. Now, things like that run across numerous services. And I just think that overall picture, if you start breaking it down like this, you could lose some things. So that's my first question. Where's the reassurance? And we'll pick up contract management because we said that was going to be done this year. So where in this list would that sort of fall?
In terms of saying contract management will be done this year, was that? Okay, yeah, I mean, that was an area that was requested to look at, and yeah, of course, we can, if that's an area members want more assurance on, we will look at it. There will also be a contract management follow-up based on the limited assurance we provided in January. All our limited assurance audits will be followed up within the year to ensure that progress is being made against the actions raised.
Yes, Mandy, please. Yeah.
Thank you. So my next question was sort of partly answered by an email that hopped to us late last evening, and it was around this is a new authority. We have lots of new officers, and the great thing is lots of new set pairs of eyes that perhaps will be looking at things afresh and anew. So for me, I probably won't be doing a whole year's plan at the moment. You know, is it possible that it can be flexible? So if someone new in role picks up an issue that they think really is worthy of looking at, there can be the flexibility within the work plan for them to add things in as we go through the year. That's my second question.
Yes, the plan has been set up to be flexible this year, and part of the reason it is high level as well is to identify it. We don't know necessarily the specific details of those areas to look at, so we're looking at high level risk and saying, okay, This is the sort of headline area, but we will then engage with those managers to get a sort of more detailed audit scope of the risk areas to focus on with our audit work. But yes, the plan does intend to remain flexible to respond to those emerging risks that are identified by the council this year.
Thank you very much. Just moving on, I think it's page 54. We've got some very specific items there, and that's the Octagon Theatre project support and the Brewhouse Theatre support. I'm just trying to understand what support means. Is it that we are giving them day-to-day running support, financial support? And again, you've said there's going to be more detail. Will this committee, you're asking us to agree this without any detail, will it come back with the detail for us to again see once that's sort of ironed out? Thank you.
I've got Liz, Adam first. Liz, do you want to speak first, or do you want to Adam speak first?
Well, it might help if I just explain. First of all, I think Appendix A says quarters 1 and 2. It's not the whole year, is it? Which allows for greater flexibility. But also on the Octagon and the Brewhouse, both of those organisations have had revenue support for many years, but they've been treated differently, and they still are being treated differently because the Octagon is owned by the council, whereas the Brewhouse is owned and run by the council. The Brewhouse is owned by the council but leased to a not-for-profit organisation. So where the costs of running the Octagon are in the base budget, because they came through in the base budget from South Somerset District Council, the cost of the revenue support for the Brewhouse are in the VCFSE spreadsheet of grants and commissioned activity that is due for a full review just as soon as the officer who put that spreadsheet together is back from leave, and then I'm going to book in a full day to go through every line of that spreadsheet with him. And it is complicated, and there are further complications in arts organisations in Somerset that are owned and operated, every single one of them in a different way. So I'm well aware of the piece of work that needs to be done there. So, and that will undoubtedly, the work that we do with the VCFSE sector will come back here. It's also been raised as a strategic risk. So at the last, I think it was the last LGR implementation board, we raised it, and the risk that is inherent in the voluntary sector, because as the chief executive of Spark put it to me, you don't know what we're doing in Somerset until we're not doing it. And I thought that was a really, really good point. And so I asked that it be added to the risk register as a strategic risk, and that we need to explore through this spreadsheet exactly what's being funded, not only to which organisation it's going, but where it's coming from, because some is from base budgets, some is from, for instance, housing revenue accounts, some is from government grants, some is ongoing, some is one-off. There is, as you, I'm sure, understand, there's a huge amount of work to do this summer. Vesting Day was the beginning of it. It was a marker point, but it certainly was nowhere near the end of it. And a lot of that very important work is outstanding. And, you know, it's on my radar very much. So thank you for the questions. They're good ones.
Thank you, Liz. Mandy, do you want any more?
Yeah, just
I want to bring Jason in then, please.
Thank you. Just to come back, I think for transparency, and there's been a lot of conversation about the Octagon because of that capital element as well. I wasn't aware there was a revenue implication. I think if we're talking about it in future, there needs to be that clarity for councillors that there's more than one element of that, because we've got lots of other theatres in Somerset as well. So I would welcome that being very clear. And as for this is Q1 and 2, we are 1 month just about into Q1 already. So I sort of would have hoped for a bit more flesh on the bones, certainly for Q1, because we're rushing through that and time goes by very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Jason, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just on the general point Councillor Chilcott's raised in terms of the details of the audit. We've got the audit title, but I agree with her. Perhaps we need a few words after that to explain a few of them. Because I'm looking at these, I know most of them, might be the odd one actually, I'm kind of going, not 100% sure what that is. Clearly we haven't agreed the scopes of those audits necessarily, but we could add a few lines just to give you a flavour of what that audit area and what that focus is likely to be. If members would find that helpful, we could put that into future iterations of this.
I would find that really helpful because I don't think this gives us much to go on. Thank you.
Lee, did you want to speak?
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to support Mandy and what Liz have said in terms of the theatres. I know I'm very parochial with Mandy, having lived in mine, the Regal Theatre, the Wellesley at Wellington and Uncle Tom Cobley and all. So it would be good because I'm involved in a lot of Amdram areas around the county. So it would be, and get challenged quite a bit. So it would be interesting to have a transparent knowledge of, and thanks to you, Liz, for reassuring us that's going to happen around the theatres around the county on how we're consistent in terms of funding and our support from the council. So support you, Mandy and Liz. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. Adam, did you want to say anything else?
I was going to say the spreadsheet Alistair sent out last evening does have a little bit more detail on some of those audits where we do know a bit more about the focus of it. Some will just be headline areas until we can sort of meet the managers and sort of work out the exact focus.
Okay, is there anybody else wish to speak on this? Oh, yes, please. Norman?
Thank you. Page 56, you've got climate and place and climate change strategy follow-up. I was hoping that this was going to be a bit more upfront than that, bearing in mind it's one of the priorities of the council, and bearing in mind the recent CIFA reports and guidance that is referred to later on in this meeting, that the role of the financial profession is in leading and measuring and reporting the efforts to tackle climate change. TMP 13 about the environment, social and governance risk, and the ability of the measures that we're taking with our tree plan to generate serious sums of money towards the council in carbon and phosphates. So I would have thought that it would be just a bit more than we're going to keep an eye on it, that it would be a regular report coming back to this committee.
Adam, please.
If that's something members would see as a priority going forward, then yeah, I mean, it's your audit plan to give you assurance that the key risks of the council are being effectively managed. So if you would like to see regular reports, like a sort of key control area report on climate change, that is certainly something we can add in.
Well, yes, please, if I could propose it, Mr. Chairman.
I'd need Jason to come in first, and I think he needs to. Thank you.
I think we just need to be clear around what's done in audit committee in terms of the governance stuff and what fits in with the scrutiny committee. We do have a scrutiny committee that looks at this area and would be more into the detail of what's happening. Obviously, this committee is concerned with the governance and how those things work. So just need to be which one that focuses in the report there.
Norman, please.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, I realise I'm stepping on in two places at the same time, but it is seeing these structures put in place and up together, because I don't believe they're there at the moment, or I certainly haven't seen them.
I agree with Jason. I think it is more of a scrutiny road, but it's no reason why we can't keep an eye on it. But you know, it is definitely for scrutiny to deal with it. Mandy, please.
Can I go back and lightly challenge that? Page 48 is asking us to determine that the audit coverage contained within the proposed audit plan is sufficient. I think probably what we're saying is in that area we don't feel it's sufficient.
I'll ask Jason to come back.
If I respond, yeah, absolutely. So there's two items from this committee. Audit plan coverage, you'll get internal audit reports. You're being asked for the audit plan here and have it got enough coverage. In terms of then what's the council doing in that area, that definitely fits in the remit of scrutiny, challenging and making sure we're actually doing it. This committee would direct to make sure that we have enough coverage across the whole council on all the risks in delivery, etc. So you're right, it is both. It depends which focus you have on it and which committee therefore is the appropriate one to do it.
Liz, please.
there is a real weakness in all of this area of work that is no reflection on this council, but it's that it's not statutory work. And that's one for government, not for us. I'd much rather some of it did become statutory, particularly with regard to planning and development.
Okay, is there any more questions, please? Thank you very much. Okay. Going to move on now to the audit progress report.
Can I just check?
Jason.
I think in terms of the audit charter, you should be
Yeah.
agreeing that you're happy with the audit charter.
Don't sound like we're totally happy with it, but I think there's a few bits and pieces we would like to put in it, isn't there, Mandy? Would you like to recommend or a few bits?
I think the devil's in the detail, and I think the question we've had raised by Councillor Cavill is probably reflecting we don't actually know what's behind some of those headings. And I think that's reflected in quite a few of the questions today. We did have a late, obviously, email yesterday, which I read through, but that's obviously not in the public domain, so we're not here to discuss that today. Thank you.
And it was very late as well, and I have brought that up with Adam. It was Alistair who sent that. It was very late today. So I think it is here, but obviously not the bones. It's not the total detail here. So I think we're going to have a bit of we're going to have to be a bit fair about this, and I think we should support the plan, but maybe with some caveats, maybe that we could do with some more detail. I think that's down to the officers and SWAT to actually guide us through that and give us the detail we want, because it actually is a flexible plan, isn't it? To be fair, when you read it, it is pretty flexible. I thought it's very good, to be honest, how you've done it. But I think that's how we do it. Are we happy with that? That we go with that, and then. Yeah. Oh, Amanda, I know you're not totally happy with it, but I think that's the only thing we can do, really.
I'm not unhappy. It's just, you know, we're at the start of a new council. There's a lot of really critical things this year. We haven't got the detail really to fully appreciate what this work will entail. And we are overseeing and we're looking for assurance. And I think that assurance will come throughout the year. I don't think it's here in front of us today, I think is what I'm saying. And I don't think it can be. But you're asking us for assurance, and I don't think with what we've got and where we are, we can fully have that. I think we've got as much as we can have, but we're not fully there. It all developed during the year, I think.
I think you're right. So it's like a flexible plan. So what we do is if we're not happy with it, we just say we're not happy, we want some more stuff, more detail put back. But I think we've got to agree the plan in front of us today, and it's for us then to direct which areas we want to work on, I think. I think that's the fair approach to it, to be fair. So are we happy with the plan with that? Yeah. We're all happy. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
That's it. Flexible.
Flexible plan. That's flexible. I'm not very flexible at my age now anymore. Anyway. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to item 7. I think it's Grace taking this one. Oh, there she is. Hello,
Yes.
Grace.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, good morning, everyone. The first report that we have on the agenda today is our progress report and sector update. So this is for the Legacy Somerset County Council for the financial year 22-23, which we're starting the audit for at the moment. So this report starts on page 63. But the key information is on page 68. This outlines our planned timescales for our key deliverables. So you'll see that we're planning to bring our audit plan for the county to the next audit committee in June. And then our final reports for both the value for money and the financial statements audit will be reported in January 2024. We are conscious that obviously we have 5 legacy councils and the pension fund that we're auditing at the moment for prior financial years. They are in various stages of completion. We have prior year audits outstanding for a couple of them. So we have taken this away internally, and I've met with my colleagues to make sure that the committee has a timescale of when to expect certain reports, and also that you're not overwhelmed with audit reports and have a chance to consider each of them in detail as well. So that is something that I'm going to pick up with Jason in the coming weeks to propose a plan of what we're bringing to each of the committees and make sure that you have coverage of all of those. There's also a sector update in the appendices to this report. I wasn't planning to go through each of them in detail, but I am happy to take any questions on the report if there are any.
Are there any questions on the report? No, we haven't got any. Oh, hang on, Abby. Come on, we've got to have one.
Just a quick one. Grace, where you refer to value for money, what is it you exactly mean here? Because obviously, in terms of council, we are obliged to give a service to our residents, but there it comes a bit of how do we actually measure that? So can you clarify that a little bit for me?
Yes, of course, yes. So we are required under the National Audit Office requirements to report on our value for money each year for all of our audited bodies. So this is reported in our auditor's annual report at the end of the year. For this, we look at the arrangements that are in place to secure value for money. So there's a focus on three key areas. So one of them being financial sustainability. So this is looking at medium-term financial planning, outturns, budgeting, and how all that ties together. One on governance, so how decisions are made, how information flows through the council, and the decision making that goes on in each of the scrutiny committees, cabinet, council, etc. And then the improving the 3 E's, which are economy, efficiency and effectiveness. This is looking at procurement, contract management and the arrangements in place to ensure that that is done correctly and in line with policies. So our commentary is on the arrangements that are in place by the council and have those acted effectively within the year. So we do that each year. So you'll see previous auditors' annual reports for the legacy councils that have already been published. And we'll also do that again for 22-23 for all of our ongoing audits.
If I may, so basically financial sustainability and risks are key. And
Yes.
you look at this and you look at it keenly to ensure that whatever we do is financially sustainable for the council and the taxpayer.
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Page 77, where it's sort of giving like a sector update about councils of risk and running out of money next year. One of the statements, it says Grant Thornton said additional government funding alone will not lead to improvements and that councils should focus on improving governance, developing financial stability plans. But the crucial thing is they do need more money, councils. So improving your governance, that doesn't actually increase your cash flows, your money, but do you believe there is a need for more government funding for councils? Thank you.
I think, like you said, I think that the funding alone doesn't answer the question. So I think it's coming back to the value for money work really, and what are the arrangements in place to then spend any additional funding and monitor that through the governance arrangement. So I think that's where the comment is coming back to is how that money would then be spent. And obviously not all councils are well run, and you'll see from the press the section 15114 notices. There's lots of public interest reports and things like that going on. So making sure that the decisions that are made around key things are in line with policies and making sure that is value for money for the taxpayer.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Mike Lewis, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 70, talks about the delayed publication of the audited local authority accounts in the wider sphere. I appreciate that we have got the combination and the move to a unitary authority. Are we on schedule as far as our audited accounts are concerned, or is there likely to be slippage?
So there is.
Sorry, Grace, do you want to answer that or do you want Jason to answer it? Sorry.
Yeah, happy for Jason to comment, yeah.
Well, I'm intrigued what Grace was going to say.
Oh, okay, well, so Grace, do you want to answer first and then we'll let Jason come in?
Yeah, I will. So the deadline for audited accounts this year has moved back to September, the end of September 2023. So the honest answer is yes, there will be slippage. We do not expect to meet that deadline, given where we are with prior year audits outstanding for both legacy Somerset councils and others around the country as well. So for the county, we're aiming for January 24, and I'll let other audit teams come back to you with timescales for the other legacy councils too.
So, sorry, can I just understand, was that January 24, that's the slippage, or
Yes.
have I got the wrong date?
Yes, January 24 will be the slippage. So the deadline is September, but we're hoping to report in January for the county.
If I can just add to that, I think we've got a real issue here with failing our residents, if I'm quite truthful, around the audit framework. There was a survey done and a consultation said, can we delay the publication of accounts? So statutory, in the last year, we had to produce our accounts by June, and then they were audited thereafter. For the coming year, they've brought the deadline forward to May. So the end of May, we will have to publish the accounts for all 5 predecessor councils. And then we have to wait till January at the very earliest before they're audited, and even longer in some other cases for some of the councils that we still have outstanding accounts going back at least 2 years in one of the councils still not signed off. I think for the public it's pretty rubbish, to be honest, in terms of timely reporting. The system's broken quite simply. In terms of us hitting that statutory deadline the end of May, I think we are going to be struggling to get all 5 across the line. We are working hard on it, but I certainly wouldn't give the committee assurance we will hit all 5. Bearing in mind, one of the councils has 2 years of previously outstanding already not signed off. So we're working hard. I think for some of the organisations, we will get there for the end of May publication. But even then, we are going to have quite a delay before they're audited. So that there is a real issue here in terms of getting that full assurance from external auditors that your accounts are up together, because you're going to be waiting an awful long time to get that assurance across the piece, I'm afraid.
Mandy, please.
Thank you, and I'd echo that, absolutely. I think the system isn't working well. And just, I suppose, a slight bugbear of mine, really, we've got this generic information on page 17, December 22, there are over 600 local audit opinions outstanding. It'd be really helpful in reports like this to let us know what is outstanding here, because you've just mentioned sort of some of it, and there's a lot of generic information within all the audit reports, and I think it'd be nice if sometimes there was some Somerset what's relevant to us information in it. That's always been an issue I've raised, but I think it would be helpful moving forward, and I'll leave that with our auditors.
Andy, please.
It's a question for Jason. I know that we had problems in getting the auditors to finalise the accounts for the county council. There was a problem with the strategic value of big assets. Now, I know it was brought to committee, I think it was either last meeting or the meeting prior to that, that they were working on it and building a framework for valuing these assets. Is that sort of problem valuing of these great big strategic, if I say strategic asset, is that now been solved? And going forward, that won't be a recurring thing going forward in you can't give it 100% assurance on that, but is that something that we've now, we can now work out these asset values and it goes into our balance sheet when it going forward? So it's not a problem in terms of the auditors looking at it and signing it off?
So in terms of the asset values that were filled into the 22-23 accounts for Somerset County Council, we have received those back from the valuers, received those back a week or so ago. So we've got those, so they will be incorporated into the accounts. One of the problems across the piece there has been across the whole of local government is around the infrastructure assets, the values of those. The sort of, as auditors have delved into the detail of some of the valuations across the piece, and not just talking about the county council, across generally, there has been an awful lot more accuracy and pressure put on valuers to justify their figures, and the different services and school play areas and things like that now are critical importance. We have lots of residents queued up outside wanting to know the value of school playgrounds, but they are very important for the accounts, apparently. That has resulted in a lot of the delays you're seeing nationally. It's not the audit firm's fault. They are being pushed themselves by the regulators over this. So that across the piece has done things. I think the other things in terms of the other councils, so coming back to question that Amanda just asked, just to update members that in terms of the outstanding accounts there are from the district councils that are now part of this report. So Sedgemoor, the 2021 and the 21-22 accounts are still outstanding. Mendip, it's the 21-22, and South Somerset is the 21-22. So we've still got 4 outstanding audit reports from prior years that we've still got to get signed off. Clearly, also, there has been issues around commercial valuations and things like that as well as part of those audits. So it is a key area. This is not going to be resolved quickly.
Mandy, please.
Thank you. I understand that, and I feel for the team. They are juggling a lot of sets of accounts. My question is, have we still got the knowledge of those authorities within the team that will be able to provide the information to get them signed off. I think that is a risk. I hope it's being managed. But, you know, where there are one or two members of staff that we don't have anymore, do we have the knowledge to still complete those accounts? I suppose that's my question.
Nicola, please.
Hello members, for those that don't know me, I'm Nicola Hicks, the Service Director for Finance Procurement. So I'll just come in and answer that question. So at the moment, we are struggling, as Jason said, with capacity to deliver, especially as we've got a new finance system. So we've got the finance teams trying to learn a new system, as well as obviously retaining that knowledge of legacy systems. What I would say to mitigate some of the risk that we may lose some of our legacy accountants or staff from those areas, we have brought in an external team. So we have commissioned a chap called Graham Oliver, who's got lots of extensive knowledge working in local authorities, and his team are supporting us to deliver, help us deliver those sets of accounts across the piece. So I would say that helps to mitigate some of that risk in terms of the knowledge going out, being spread. But at the moment, yes, we have brought those that have come in from the districts are retaining with us, and they are leading the closure of the accounts alongside Graham's team, which I think is helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lee, please.
Thanks, Chair. Jason, you mentioned in terms of the valuation process and the fact there's been delayed. I think I just could do with some reassurances. Probably the committee could, and I've raised this before perhaps, and may have had a direct answer, but I can't think that I have. In terms of the valuation procurement process, so valuers that we use across the 5 authorities, South Somerset, Mendip, etc. So I work in financial services, and and I understand what you're saying in terms of valuers are put under pressure to give a value that is requested, not of true value. How do you ensure that the values you're employing are, you know, RICS accredited? I'm sure they are valued by the Red Book, and there's no conflict of interest across the board when they're valuing infrastructure or assets, land and building, to ensure that it's a consistent piece across the 5 or 6 councils, and that the valuations are consistent and avoiding conflict of interest via the RICS process. Thank you, Chair.
Really good question. So the valuers have got to be RICS qualified. They have those professional guidelines, as you mentioned. I think what's been some of the underlying issues, so why has there been so many issues? Actually, it's not the valuers per se, because they're competent, independent, qualified, and all the rest of it. It's the underlying records. I think the new scrutiny that has thrown up over the last few years that councils weren't very good at recording the size of their school playgrounds and things like that, because frankly it didn't really matter that much. Now it really does. So there's been that pressure on the underlying records, and I'll be quite truthful, I think most of us have been found wanting in some of that detail when it's been really scrutinised, and therefore has gone round in the circle of doing that work again and making sure there's more detail there. I don't know if Nicola wanted to add to that.
Yeah, if I could just add, one of the things that we did to the amalgamation of the 5 councils was the asset database. TechForge is a new database that's come on. It's a new online. So we've uploaded all of the assets onto that database. So the team are in the process of making sure there's consistency around the mapping of areas, how things are measured, making sure that database is complete with all of that data, so that when we look to do valuations, albeit whether it's an internal team or external team, they're having the same sets of information for the 5 councils. So I think that will help and mitigate some of that going forward. But at the moment, we're still in the process. We've got a mixture across the 5, I would say, in terms of whether it's in-house valuers or external valuers. At the moment, and that will be assessed as part of the new council in terms of whether we want to retain in-house, do we want to do external, do we want to do a mixture of the two based on skill set.
Come back, Lee.
Just quickly, thank you very much, Jason and Nikki, for that. That's reassuring, much more reassuring, because I think it could prove a risk, as I found in my career, if we're not consistent with applying the conflict of interest processes and procedures across the valuations, particularly because it's such a massive thing towards the financial accounts. So thank you for the reassurance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Grace, do you want to? No more. Oh, sorry, Andy.
Just a quick, I just want for clarity that it's not the preparation of the accounts we're waiting on, it's the auditing of the accounts to be finalised. Obviously, all the accounts have been prepared for the district councils. It's just the auditing that's it's taking time to do. Is that correct? Thank you.
Yeah, so all of those accounts I read out from the councils have been produced. It's the auditing process, of course. It's the auditing resource, but then again, if there has been issues where the auditors have come in, the underlying records haven't supported some of this stuff, that's therefore caused the delay as well. So it's a bit of both, but the auditing profession is really struggling across the piece. You see that for the national figures. I would suspect most councils in the country will have the accounts published by the end of May. They'll hit the deadline, but then you'll see a massive delay before they're actually signed off by auditors because of just how the system is and how the contract for local government was let nationally. There is no penalty for delay on the auditors, unlike the NHS contract where there is. So if you're an audit firm, you're going to prioritise the NHS work, and local government is perhaps less important.
Mike, please.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, in terms of valuation, at a later meeting, we could have a real focus on that because of the transfer that's occurred. Then perhaps we need to get into the weeds, as it were, on the valuation.
I think you're right, actually. I think that's very important, what we're hearing here today. And of course, we're quite diverse on our assets as well. We're everywhere from a school playing field to, you know, a green space that we might be able to put a solar farm on or something. It's massive value. It's so diverse. It's not like a corporate business where you're a builder and you're just buying building land, is it? You know, so that, and that's probably another one of our problems, actually, to be honest. And I don't expect the external auditor, they're looking at it, they're thinking, oh my God, you know, I understand what the problem is. I really do. Okay, so should we, is there any more questions? Sorry, Jason.
I was just going to make a comment and a point, really. It's on page 77, and it's the headline, nearly 60 councils at risk of running out of money next year. It's a very real risk, this, across the sector. But what's interesting, of course, is the leader and chief exec have recently received a letter from central government telling us local government's got too high balances. We should be spending them. I'm really struggling to balance the two together, if I'm honest. So there is a bit of a disconnect. So there is some national work going on to make sure DLUC actually understand how local government reserves work, because I don't think they do. You know, schools' balances are schools. I can't spend them. The LEP fund is the responsibility of LEP. It's not my money. They're looking at headline figures without actually understanding the underlying detail. So I'm hoping that the piece of work that's happening across the profession on government understanding reserves might make them understand the real crisis there is in terms of that financial sustainability of councils.
Simon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in that same section from Grant Thornton on page 77, it makes the point that the unitaries are the worst hit, and they suggest that the largest gap is net spending of 10.2%, which of course is enormous in our case as a budget. But there's a very, very clear warning from auditors here that that is a situation that they are walking into and looking at now. It's not a new situation. It's a situation that's crept up on all of them, and the worst hit are the unitaries. And they say 10%. Well, if we were 10% adrift on our budget, it would be a real problem.
Yeah, to be honest, it's a perfect storm, isn't it? We've got high interest rates, high inflation. You know, we've just formed a new unitary authority. You know, it's an absolute perfect storm, and which is not actually helping us. We think it is because we've joined all the councils together into one, but actually it's a big ask really for us to.
I do find it disingenuous that the government is saying we've got too high balances, because, you know, do you listen to the government or do you listen to your auditors? Jason, a clue, please.
I'd always say we've never got enough balances, but I'm a finance person. I'd like to have loads. But exactly. But however, actually, as a council, we are at the lower end of that balance spectrum, and therefore it's something we need to be very wise to. I think, like I say, I think the government's position is from a lack of understanding the underlying things that are going on, and they're not perhaps sat in my seat looking at the sort of figures I'm looking at going forward over the next 2 or 3 years.
Mandy, please, and I've got.
Thank you. Lots of comments with the government being made, but I have to say both are right. We have some councils that still have huge reserves, some councils with next to none. So you have two ends of the spectrum, and some probably have got too many, and some really have not. And, you know, let's remember this year we have got a large overspend predicted, and we understand why that is, but it's only reserves that can balance that. So if you haven't got them there, it's going to be very challenging for councils this year. But I think both are right. Some do have a lot too many, and some have very little, and there's a disparity for the residents within those areas. If you're in a council that's huge reserves, you'll have lots more flexibility in what you can and can't do than those that really have very little.
Simon, please.
Probably an obvious thing, but our councils across the country explaining to government that they're not right and that they've got to look into the detail more.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to answer that question. There is some work being done with the LGA and with the various treasurers' societies to actually go through that and explain that in a bit more detail. So give them some real life examples of authorities so that it can actually get underneath the skin of it a bit more.
I think it's the scale that's the problem.
I think we can talk about this all day, actually.
Grant Thornton suggested it's 120, they need to save over £125 per person by 25, 26. Yeah, that's each and every person. What's Somerset got? 570,000 people? Yeah, that's a huge.
Okay, I think we've talked about this enough. I think we need to move on. I think we could talk about this all day. We could have a separate meeting about this. So can I move on, Grace, to the next item, please?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So our next agenda item on page 81 is the Informing the Audit Risk Assessment document. So you would have seen something similar in prior years. We're required to send this out each year under the international standards on auditing. So this is a document that is sent to management to complete during our planning procedures to cover key areas such as going concern, fraud and laws and regulations. So this is what we've received back from Jason and the finance team, and we're bringing it to you just for your attention. And if you have any questions on it, then myself or Jason, I'm sure I'm happy to answer those.
Are there any questions from members? Mandy.
Thank you. I found the wording odd in this document, actually, because we're looking to see whether these responses are consistent with our understanding. So I'm not quite sure what that means. So I challenge the auditors exactly what that means, but I've got a few questions if I may. So the first one's on question 1, what do you regard as the key events or issues? There's 2 lines there. I think you could have written a whole piece on it, actually, but I just would have expected a little bit more. I just think there's a lot going on at the moment, and 2 lines probably doesn't fully reflect what we all know and are aware of that's going on. So I just question that sort of short response. And question 2B on question 2 isn't really answered. Have there been any events or transactions that may cause you to change or adopt new accounting policies? Just a no would do, but I don't think that's been answered. I am being picky, but these are questions, and I don't know when completing them whether there's a full awareness they're going out into the public domain and people are going to be asked about them at a later date. Question 7 is around the existence of loss contingencies and or unasserted claims. Yes, we're aware, and they talk about legal cases there. I'm not aware. I don't know what the risk is or how much they are. So, you know, my understanding is now that we have them, but it doesn't give any more than that. So do we need to know more as a committee? And page 104, question 6, I don't think that was answered. And that's it. Thank you.
Do you want to quickly come in?
But if I may, Chair, please, on question 1, that question relates to 22-23, doesn't it? I think for the same question for 23-24, indeed wouldn't be 2 lines, it would be an essay, wouldn't it? So I don't know the answer to this. I just wonder when those questions were asked and answered, because I think every month that's gone by since they were answered, the response would have got longer and more complex, as everything's changed so much in a year that when we're looking back at this as it says events and issues that will have a significant impact on the financial statements for 22-23, that's retrospective, isn't it? If you ask the same question in scrutiny, looking forward to 23-24, I think you would get a very different, much longer answer.
Again, please.
I think we have just heard that we've got lots of accounts not signed off, for example, and that's absolutely 22, 23, some of it. So, yeah, I think there's a lot that's gone on, and it will still need to be reflected in 22, 23, as well as 23, 24, because we've still got some sort of hanging over. I just would have expected a bit more, that's all, because I think it doesn't reflect the amount of work, effort and complexity to what we're being faced with at the moment.
In a minute, please.
Yeah, so just to clarify, this is in response to Somerset County Council for 22-23 rather than Somerset Council. So those outstanding audits that we got will, if we were doing this in a year's time, you would see all those things on there. So this is still related to the old Somerset County Council's 22-23 accounts, and it's got that narrow focus, hence why those things up there. I take your point about question 1. You know, we could have written lots of things in there. The purpose of the document is to hopefully highlight those key issues. We do have other meetings with the auditors and regular liaison meetings, so they are informed of the general things. We could spend, you could spend several months doing this, but if we're doing that, we're not actually closing the accounts down. So we're trying to get that balance right, but I do take the point, and we'll perhaps look at that again for future, and perhaps try and strike a happy medium in there in a bit more detail.
Any more questions? Sorry, Liz.
Just to say that Grace has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Grace. Sorry, Grace.
I was just going to echo what Jason said, really. This is just one source of information that we use for our planning, but there are several other sources that come into it. So we make inquiries of other people in the council, we make inquiries of internal audit, the monitoring officer, we have regular meetings, we're obviously in attendance at audit committees, we look at the minutes of all the other meetings that go on as well. So this is just one source of planning evidence that we use, but we do draw from other sources as well. So this isn't just the only thing we rely on.
Mandy, and I'll go
Just to finish, and I won't say any more, I question why it's here and what the value is of it. I think, like I said, some of the questions are answered, some are not. You know, is it something that we need to do as a committee to tick an audit box somewhere? I'm questioning the value and the time that everybody takes on it and what value that adds to the council, really.
It is a requirement under the auditing standards that we send these inquiries to management, and then they come back to you as those charged with governance just to review. But I do also have to have a meeting with the chair of the audit committee as well. So I know I've sent an email to Councillor Riddle to come back on that around your understanding from the perspective of those charged with governance as well.
Mike, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 88, question 9. Whilst it's not necessarily fraud, we did several years ago have issues over the highways contracts and put in place remedial work to ensure that double payments didn't occur. Have we, through the audit, looked at that system again to see if it is robust still?
Not through the audit per se, but obviously when the audit committee looked at that, was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? There were a number of recommendations, they were adopted and followed through. SWAT would have done follow-up reports to provide assurance that those actions were taken. So there's been nothing per se done on that. There is within the finance system, the new finance system, we have put in some measures to make sure in terms of duplicate payments across the piece, there is software we are using to identify that if there are any of those as well. So not just one particular area like highways, but more generally across the whole piece.
Thank you.
Happy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of fraud risk assessment, I understand that this is more about prevention than anything else. But Grace, from your experience, would you say if there was to be a fraud, would that be through procurement, outside contract, or staff or councillors? I mean, can you give us some guidance of where the problem, if there were to arise, in which area there would be?
Yeah, so we don't particularly look at fraud, so it's not our responsibility to pinpoint fraud, but it's from a mix of that. But the important thing in terms of our responsibilities with the financial statements is whether that would have a material impact on the financial statement. So given that the majority of them don't, that's our focus when we're looking at the financial statements in terms of fraud, is whether it would have a material impact.
Okay, you happy with that? Are there any other questions for Grace? No, thank you, Grace. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, so we move on to item 9. I think it's Jason, a verbal report, please.
Yep. So just to update the committee in terms of progress in terms of independent persons for the audit committee. Council's agreed that we can follow the revised SIPFA guidance and increase the number to 2. We have, as part of that process, asked you as audit committee members to fill in some questionnaires back to SWOT in terms of the kind of skills gap, knowledge, those sorts of things. So it helps to model. We had a 54% return from members. I won't go around the room and ask who didn't do the responses. That's been quite helpful in terms of identifying where there's good understanding and knowledge across the piece. So governance structures and local authorities, knowledge of overall objectives of major local authority functions, the role of the audit committee, internal audit plan and opinion, the financial statements, the financial risks facing a local authority, good knowledge of external audit. Just seen how you've grilled Grace there. I think that's evident. Good understanding of principles of risk management and the 7 principles of public life. So actually, in terms of the knowledge of the audit committee, actually is pretty good in terms of the fit for what you'd be looking for an audit committee. We have got a draft advert and job description ready to go. If members would like it, I'm quite happy to send that round, but we will be pushing that out following this meeting effectively. I'll be taking that action forward. So we will then go into the process of actually, hopefully, recruiting 2 new independent members. I will happily report back on progress of that next committee.
Andy, please.
Thank you for that, Jason. Are we going national? Or are we going, I should say, local for the advertisement? Thank you. Global.
I think we may be getting ahead of ourselves here a little bit. Actually, some of the media we use, things like LinkedIn, actually is pretty national and those sorts of things. Clearly, you want somebody that's actually wants to, as well as their knowledge generally to supplement the audit committee, you actually want them to have a bit of an interest in Somerset Council. I would say that's one of the things you're kind of looking for, as opposed to I'm just an audit committee expert and I live on the Isle of Man or something like that. I think you want somebody like that, but somebody who's got a Somerset connection. But yeah, we will be using mainly free media to kind of pushing it out. But if people have also got other people that they think would be appropriate, which is why I'll send the stuff round to audit committee members. I'm quite happy to do it to all members, actually. It'd be helpful. We might find, because this now carries £1,000 with it, as opposed to previously had nothing. Other councils that have done this have received reasonable responses. I don't think they've been killed in the rush, but they have actually noticed that small reimbursement has actually resulted in a lot more people coming forward.
I think we got quite a big pool actually, because we will have ex-councillors as well that might have actually served as well on audit as well. I mean, we know we've gone from 4 authorities to 1, so there's probably a lot of people out there actually that love Somerset and will work with Somerset. So I think that's a big market, and we would have a list of all of those already. Who had their hand up? Was it you, Mandy, again? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to say, I think it was up to 2, not necessarily 2. So we hope, and I have to say, I love audit, and I hope lots of others out there do. And because I think it's a fascinating part of the workings of the council. Just to comment, some new members won't have had the questionnaires. It was working on last year's knowledge as opposed to this, so that might be reflective in your 54%. And just to say as well, a lot of the questions I found quite random, and a lot were relating to the detailed knowledge of very long SITFA reports. So for me, I suppose my question is, are we expected to know them all chapter and verse? Because I would expect that the bits that we need to know and understand are brought before us by yourself, Jason, and your team. But I wouldn't expect councillors to have an in-depth knowledge of the whole of what they contain, which sort of seemed to be what the questions were leaning to. So I'll leave that there.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. I think we both had the same opinion, to be honest. Are there any more? Sorry.
I'd love a response to that, because I think if audit are sending these questions out, I don't think they related to that list you just read out, Jane.
Yeah, so the questions are based on the SITFA guidance, which I would say is a bit purist, for want of a better phrase. In terms of the response we got back, the list I read to you was back from those responses in terms of the key strength areas, which I thought was really good actually. You as members are not expected to be professional experts on every single thing that the audit committee is responsible for. Clearly, I don't think anybody could be, to be quite truthful. What actually this whole process has done though is twofold really. It's helped us with looking for the independent members, and I think the good thing is we're not looking to fill a specific gap, so we're looking for somebody who's got some good knowledge as opposed to a particular area. So the feedback from what we've got so far is the committee have got a pretty good understanding across all the areas, and I'm looking around the room and the experiences people have got here. That's not a surprise, is it? The second part is it helps identify what further training we need to do for the audit committee. So that's how we'll help form you up to what's an appropriate level that we'd expect audit committee members to have. So we use that as part of the training program as well, Mandy, but we're not expecting you to know every single SITFA code inside and out. Because I have to say, some of us even have to refer to it, refresh ourselves with some of the finer detail at times. That's not something we expect you to do on a daily basis.
By the time I'd finished the questions, I thought I wasn't qualified to sit on audit, I've got to say, because there's a lot in there I do not know in detail.
Jason, please.
One of the things I would say, and I'm not sure the questionnaire picked it up because it was more of a technical questionnaire actually, and it's one of the things I think is really important, I would say, for audit committee, is that inquisitive mind, and to not just sit there and go, we agree, everybody approved, yes, hands up. And I know there's some of you that like asking questions more than others. I'm not looking at any directions, Mandy, at all. But actually, for me, that's one of the key qualifications for the audit committee, is you should be challenging, asking questions, seeking assurance. That's really important. And actually, I think around this table, that's really good as my feedback in terms of an audit committee, is you do ask plenty of questions. The worry thing for me as the Section 151 officer is every single report went through with no debate and you all just said, yeah, it's fine. If you look, and Grace mentioned it in her report, those councils that have failed, the financial failings, it's largely because the governance was rubbish. And you said, so where were the audit committee members? Why didn't they ask the questions? They must have just sat on their hands and went, oh, we trust everybody. We're not going to raise any questions. It's all okay. So that bit of the questionnaire, Mandy, perhaps didn't come through enough, but is present when you attend the meetings.
Habib, please. Did you want to speak?
Just as a comment, having said that, Jason, we still trust you.
Well, I don't know. He was talking about the Isle of Man, so I was throwing it a bit. Are there any more questions, please? Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the fraud policies now. But I think they're just a refresher, aren't they? Just are they? Is that right? Sorry, Nicola, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so these are a standard set of policies, all were in place in the legacy authorities, but we've obviously had to update them to make sure they're fit for purpose for the Somerset Council. Within there is delegation to me to ensure the policies are updated to reflect changes as we go through in terms of job titles, different things like that. There's also in there the implementation of action plans. That's something I would probably, from listening to the discussion today, coming new into the what was the county council into Somerset Council. I'm coming in questioning different things, wanting to understand, look at things. So probably I can provide some assurance that I will be asking those questions, whether it's fit for purpose. I'm also asking around how do we get that training and development on this awareness out there? How do we disseminate that throughout the organisation to make sure people do know where to contact should they spot something that's not quite right? And that's part of the work that I'll be picking up with the other tier 3s at the moment to make sure we do get that across the organisation, especially as we see movement in as we go through different tiers of recruitment. We just wanted to provide some assurance on that.
Are there any questions? Mandy.
Sorry, I'm changing now. Couple of questions. Firstly, around, well, you answered my first question. It said our reviews and policies. And my first question was, do you mean SCCs or all of the council? So this is a bit of a pull together. So thank you for that. Just around tax evasion, going back to my working life, it used to be there was a personal liability in that if and I know Lee's shaking his head because it was drummed into me, even though you worked for a large corporate, if you did not report tax evasion, someone said to you, no, I'm taking all cash and not declaring, you say, no, I really don't want to know that. There was a personal responsibility. Yet in the report that I see me here today, it's very much a corporate responsibility. So I'd like to understand, firstly, why it's different working in a large corporate perhaps to a council in that emphasis. And my second question was, again, within what we've got here, and you've picked it up, there is no mention of training, retraining and what we'll do. So I would have liked to have seen that, because councillors, for example, with this type of thing, and again, from my working life, you need to have it probably once a year and refresh and remind. And it would be nice that the assurance was that this is going to all staff, because it could be anywhere within the organisation, perhaps annually, even if it's a page or two, to just refresh and remind with everything else that's going on. So that was my questions.
Who would like to answer that one? Nicola, you came in. I thought it was going to be Jason. So
I'll be honest that I'm not sure of the answer of the first one. Do you know, Jason?
No. So we'll take that.
Oh, Lee can answer it. Go on, Lee.
I might be able to help. In terms of where I work, which is in a banking organisation, our mandatory training, Mandy's absolutely right because she used to work in a bank. It is individual responsibility. We have to complete what they call SARS, suspicious activity report forms. If you deem some suspicious activity going through an account, if you don't, and it's found that the man on the Clapham omnibus would deem it as suspicious, so a neutral person would say, hang on a minute, how on earth have you missed that? Of course it's suspicious. Then you are legally personally liable. So Mandy's right. And actually to echo her point as well, I'd like the reassurance that the tax evasion, the group bribery policy we're coming up to in a minute, all that is wrapped into members of staff, colleagues, mandatory training to ensure that we as an audit committee have that reassurance that these individuals in the council or thousands or whatever there is do know. If I walk to somebody upstairs in a minute and I said, talk me through your group bribery policy, talk me through your money laundering policy, talk me through your your AML or whatever, they'd have an idea what I was talking about. That's what I think we need to know as a reassurance for an audit committee, because for whatever we decide in this room, that's great. But if the members of staff aren't aware of the policies, we're all in the cart. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think members need to be aware because, we're talking to the public all the time. The big stuff now. Yes, I think you're right.
Really good shout, Chair. Maybe us as members need some sort of mandatory training in terms of policies that we could legally be liable for being in contravention with, to echo Mandy's point.
One of the biggest things is planning, isn't it?
Well, there we are.
So, okay, so Andy, please.
Thank you. One of the big things the government has cracked down in the last sort of 10 years is IR35, where companies employ people, but they're not actually employed on the books. They're contractors, or they've got set up a limited company to be paid through. And the government's really cracked down heavily on this, because if you work for somebody for 40 hours a week and you're deemed to be just working for that one person, you're actually technically an employee. You're not a contractor, or you cannot do it through a limited company. I know major organisations have looked at this, the BBC and other people. What do councils do? Because obviously we must have lots of people who are contractors. Are they technically breaking the rules? I think there's, put a hand up, maybe able to give us some guidance on that. Thank you.
The IR35 regulations are something we've looked at in this audit committee in the past, and there were questions asked about employees of what was then the county council who might have come under that regulation. So I'm not saying I know any answers. I just know that it's a subject that we have looked at before and continue to look at, and there is plenty of regulation on that.
Thank you. I'm aware that Anton wants to speak, but I think Jason wants to speak first, then Anton, please, and then Norman. Thank you.
Yeah, so just picking up on the general thing, and I think Anton's going to bail me out because he's going to tell me it's FSA regulations or something like that. I'm hoping to clarify that the tax buyer were not personally liable. In terms of the general point around training and awareness, absolutely. You know, after this committee, you know, these are policies that were in place across all 5 councils already. How well does everybody in the organisation know them? I wouldn't like to bet my mortgage on it, as they say. So there's more work to do, and absolutely councillors, but also contractors and the public. You know, these are policies we will publish on our website as well because of the nature of them. So there is quite a lot of work to do to raise awareness and continually raise awareness. We are looking at this and other training such as the financial regulations, procurement rules and things like that. Is how do we put that into mandatory package for all employees have to tick off and say they've seen and done.
Lee, I'll come back to you. I need to come into Anton to come in, please. He's been waiting patiently for a while.
No, that's fine. And actually, I'm here for a later item, but seeing as I have some knowledge of this, I was previously the money laundering reporting officer for Somerset County Council. My understanding is that as we are not subject to FCA regulation, we are not regulated individuals, we would not have the same responsibilities as staff in a bank, or etc. But we would have the same responsibilities as the general man in the street to always report money laundering, fraud, tax evasion, etc., etc. So there is a general sort of encompassment on any individual, and in specific relation to money laundering, it is an offence to fail to raise it and you raise your suspicions to the proper authorities. But we don't have a specific requirement to fill in forms, etc., as a person in a bank would. And obviously, I think in terms of how we deal with this with staff, we would need to be proportional to the specific responsibility. You know, I work in Treasury, I look after a certain amount of millions of pounds for the council. I would expect to have a higher burden placed on me in this area than someone who worked, I don't know, on traffic signalling, for instance.
Okay, I won't tell the traffic signal chap though. Norman, did you want to speak? Thank you, Anton.
Yeah, and Anton has very nearly more or less covered it. But if you want to set councillors back by their ears, just send them out page 127 on this meeting's report. And under the Bribery Act 2010, it states an individual is guilty of bribery offence under section 7 if they're failing to report and prevent bribery. And I don't think people have that general realisation that we're each and individually culpable.
Thank you. I'd like to move on. Are we all happy to move on? Yeah. Thank you. The next item is been removed from the agenda, as I said earlier, and we're going to move on now to Anton again, which is the Treasury Management Practices. Please, Anton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
It's 151.
So just to reiterate what is in the report, this is a very detailed and long appendix, a piece of information, the Treasury Management Practices. They are aimed at me, my team, those that are practitioners, and then up to Jason as the officer responsible for the area. They are signed off by Jason. They are not before you for adoption or a formal approval by you. They are being provided for your information as the body tasked with oversight of Treasury, and to upskill your knowledge, provide you with information. And obviously, whilst I don't wish to go through any specific sections, I'm here to answer as many and all questions that you might try and offer to me.
Okay, thank you, Anton. It's an extensive report. Thank you. Is there any questions, please? Mandy?
So sorry, not a question on this item, but just a slight point of order. On the last item, we didn't take a vote, and the committee's been asked to approve delegated authority to the Service Director, Finance and Procurement for updating the policies with any changes to job titles or reporting lines.
Okay,
I just think it would be helpful for
Yep, thank you very
to
much for
actually
bringing up.
vote on that.
Yes,
Just
so
to
are
make
we
sure.
happy with that, please? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we all in favour of that? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. You get to the Treasury Management, that's what. I want to see how many questions there was. So have we got any questions on the Treasury Management? Oh, all silent. Well, it's an excellent report. It's an amazing report, yeah. Okay, so no questions, Anton, you're free to go. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, Mike, sorry, Anton, hang on. Mike's decided now to come in.
Well, the question for me is, on what's the page, 15158, where the council nominates the audit committee to be responsible for ensuring effective scrutiny of Treasury management strategy and policies. And I'm not sure as a committee that we've actually done that today.
So your primary role within that will be when you take first glance at the Treasury Management Strategy and the 6th monthly and full year outturn reports as they travel via executive to full council. But effectively bringing this document to you is part of that process as well. Of making sure you're aware of aware of its existence, two, giving you the opportunity to review it in detail and ask questions regarding it, and also part of that process then of perhaps highlighting other areas that you might want to explore at a later juncture.
Does that answer your question, Mike, or not?
It does answer the question, but it leaves me with an uneasy feeling that perhaps we haven't looked at this in as much detail as we ought to. And I understand that the Treasury Management will come to us at a later stage, but I'm not sure that we've done justice to the report that's before us.
Well, I have asked for questions. You've read the report. I mean, Anton's here. Sorry, Jason.
Yeah, so may help, and I was just looking to check the date. So at your January meeting, you had the Treasury Management Strategy Statement. You did go through that, and I can remember some questions on that from certainly some councillors. I'm not looking at you at all again, Mandy. But, so you did explore some of the Treasury stuff. This here is very much just part of the package and explains, as Anton said, this is how we do the stuff on the ground. So your actual real, in terms of that sort of governance and scrutiny and challenging, is through the strategy. Then in terms of the performance, the 6 monthly report we bring, and also then the Treasury Management Outturn, which will be coming shortly at your next committee. So they're the ones that you really get into the detail on, rather than this particular one.
Andy, please.
Jason's right. We brought this back in January. We went through it really quite rigorously. And one of the key things that Mandy brought up in January, I did myself, was about we had it wasn't updated in sense, it was an old, I say an old report brought forward. And I think even the people that had signed it off wasn't yourself, Jason, it was somebody else. And one of the key things was looking about investments for commercial purposes, because that wasn't part of it. And we did ask for it to be put into it. And it's on page 168, investment for commercial purposes or commercial investments. And I know it's not part of the treasury management, but we wanted it was keen that there was a sort of statement outlining what our position is. And it's out in front of us on page 168. Thank you.
Yeah, Mandy, please.
Yeah, just to echo that, that's partly why I haven't got lots of questions, because I think we've done it fairly recently, had a read through again. I still think there are some tweaks and improvements that can be made, but I think where we are as a council, this is sufficient for now.
Okay. So are we happy to let Anton go? Anton, you can go now. Thank you very much. Sorry, second time.
Sorry, no problem.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the meeting, but would you, oh, sorry.
Excuse me, Chair, just before we close the meeting, one of the approvals we needed earlier on in the report was for the audit charter. I believe members approved the audit plan, but I don't believe we approved the charter at the same time.
So are you happy to approve the charter? Yeah, so are we all in favour?
Yeah.
Thank you. Flexible charter, yeah, thank you. I thought we had, but I mean, I had a long week. So, okay, so we're going to close the meeting now, but I wish members to hang on because we want to talk about the working plan, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we can take this offline now. Thank you.